The little boy stood completely still in the middle of Central Park, like the world had paused around him and forgotten to press play again. He was no older than 5, maybe younger. His hands were clenched at his sides, knuckles white, his lower lip trembling as tears slid down his cheeks without a sound. People flowed past him in every direction, runners with earbuds, tourists with cameras, couples arguing softly, parents distracted by their phones. No one stopped. No one looked long enough. New York didn't ignore pain out of cruelty. It ignored it out of practice. If something didn't shout, it disappeared. I noticed him because he didn't belong there. Not like that. Not alone. His clothes were wrong for the setting. A perfectly tailored navy suit, expensive fabric, pressed seams, polished shoes that had never touched a playground. A white shirt, so clean it felt ceremonial. That outfit alone could have paid my rent for months. Money didn't protect him. Money didn't save him. He looked small in a way that had nothing to do with his size. I slowed down, then stopped entirely. In this city, stopping is an invitation for trouble. But walking past him felt worse. I crouched in front of him slowly, lowering myself to his level, keeping my hands visible. "Hey," I said gently. "It's okay. Are you lost?" His eyes met mine for half a second, wide and glassy, then he broke. The crying came harder now, still quiet, still controlled, like he'd already learned that loud didn't help. "Can you tell me where your parents are?" I asked. He shook his head, shoulders shaking. I tried again, softer. Nothing. Out of reflex, more than strategy, I tried another language, one I barely used, hoping familiarity might reach him. It didn't. He cried harder, panic tightening his small face. Then he whispered a single word. "Manga." The sound of it stopped me cold. Not English. Not the accent I expected. Italian. Clean. Natural. My heart jumped. I hadn't spoken Italian properly in years, not since my semester abroad in Florence. Back then, my life felt open, full of stone streets and late nights, and the illusion that time moved slowly if you wanted it to. When I came back to New York, I kept the language alive out of stubbornness. Night classes, audio lessons on the subway. It felt like holding on to a version of myself I didn't want to lose. I took a careful breath. "Non piangere," I said quietly. "Va tutto bene." Don't cry. It's okay. The effect was immediate. His sobbing stopped like a switch had been flipped. He stared at me, stunned, as if the world had suddenly made sense again. "Sono qui, e continued. Ti aiuto. Come ti chiami?" "I'm here. I'll help you. What's your name?" "Luca," he whispered. "Mi chiamo Luca." His voice steadied as he spoke, relief loosening something in his chest. The words came faster after that, spilling out in broken bursts of Italian. He'd been walking with his father. He saw a dog. He chased it. When he turned back, his father was gone. The park became too big, too loud, too strange. I held out my hand. He took it without hesitation, gripping my fingers like he was afraid I might disappear too. "Va bene, Luca e Said. Troveremo tuo pata." It's okay. We'll find your father. As soon as I said it, I felt it, that subtle pressure change in the air, the sense that something unseen had shifted, the kind of feeling you get right before a storm breaks. I noticed the men because they didn't move like everyone else. 3 of them cut through the crowd with precision, eyes scanning, bodies angled forward with purpose. Dark suits, discreet earpieces. The kind of men who didn't waste motion and didn't explain themselves. People moved out of their way instinctively, not knowing why. Luca saw them before I did. His grip tightened, then loosened. "Marco," he said suddenly, lifting his hand and waving. One of the men froze mid-step. His head snapped toward us instantly, eyes locking onto Luca with unmistakable recognition. Relief crossed his face so fast it looked practiced. He spoke sharply into his earpiece, and within seconds the other 2 were closing in. My instincts flared. I pulled Luca closer to me without thinking. The man reached us and dropped to one knee, hands careful but thorough as he checked Luca for injuries, speaking rapid Italian under his breath. "Stai bene? Sei ferito?" Luca shook his head. "I was with the signora," he said, pointing at me. "She talks like mama." The man's gaze lifted to mine, sharp and assessing. Not hostile, not friendly, just measuring. "Thank you," he said in accented English. He was missing. He was terrified, I replied. Before the conversation could continue, The crowd parted behind him. It wasn't loud. No announcement. No shouting. Just space opening as if ordered to. A man walked toward us, and everything about him commanded attention without asking for it. Tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair brushed back neatly. His suit was immaculate, understated in the way truly expensive things always are. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. Chi è questa donna? He asked coolly. Who is this woman? Luca pulled free from my hand and ran straight into him. Papa. The change was instant. The man dropped to one knee and caught Luca mid-run, lifting him into his arms like he weighed nothing. His face softened, tension draining out of him as he pressed his forehead to his son's. Mi hai spaventato a morte, he murmured. You scare me to death. Then his eyes came back to me, sharp again, studying. I felt like I was standing under a spotlight I hadn't agreed to. Lei parla italiano, he said. You speak Italian. Sì, answered. Ho studiato a Firenze. Something flickered across his face. Interest, surprise, calculation. Alessandro Russo, he said, extending his hand. I took it. His grip was firm, warm, confident. A man used to being obeyed. Sophia Blake. Blake, he repeated softly. Non italiano. No, he nodded once. You found my son, he said. Sono molto grato. Luca reached for me again, wrapping his arms around my legs briefly before one of the men gently pulled him back. Grazie, he said earnestly. Sei gentile. When I looked up, Alessandro Russo was watching me with unsettling focus, like he was committing my face to memory. Every instinct I had told me to leave. I should go, I said. I'm on my lunch break. Dove lavora? A cafe near Columbus Circle. He inclined his head. Capisco. I didn't wait for anything else. I walked away fast, disappearing into the crowd, telling myself it was over, that it meant nothing. Even then, deep down, I knew better. I didn't notice the car at first. That was the problem. It blended too well into the city, dark, clean, unremarkable. It sat across the street from the cafe when I got off my shift that evening, engine idling, windows tinted just enough to be polite. New York is full of cars like that. Black SUVs are practically part of the skyline. I told myself it meant nothing. I walked past it, earbuds in, keys clenched between my fingers out of habit. Halfway down the block, my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I ignored it. It rang again, then a third time. I stopped under a flickering streetlight and answered, already irritated. Hello. A man's voice, calm, controlled, familiar in the way danger sometimes is. Signora Blake. My stomach tightened. Who is this? You left in a hurry today. I turned slowly. The SUV's headlights flicked on. I didn't get your number, I said, keeping my voice steady. No, he replied, but I get most things. The line went dead. I stood there longer than I should have, the city noise rushing back and around me, my pulse loud in my ears. Then the SUV pulled away smoothly, disappearing into traffic like it had never been there. I went home and locked the door twice. That night, I dreamed of Florence. Narrow streets, stone walls, church bells, and a pair of dark eyes watching me from across the Arno. The next morning, there were flowers waiting outside the cafe before we even opened. White lilies. Simple. Elegant. No card. My coworker squealed, assuming they were for her. I knew better. Around noon, my manager called me into the office, smiling too much. You have a visitor, she said. He's persuasive. Alessandro Russo stood by the counter like he owned the place. No bodyguards this time. No suit either. Dark coat. Cashmere scarf. He looked almost ordinary, which somehow made him more dangerous. Conversations around us softened without stopping. People sensed him without understanding why. You shouldn't be here, I said quietly. I wanted to thank you properly, he replied. Coffee. I'm working. I'll wait. He did. An hour passed. Then two. He never checked his phone, never rushed me. When my shift finally ended, he held the door open like a gentleman. Outside, the city felt different. Sharper. I don't accept gifts from strangers, I said as we walked. I didn't give you anything, he replied. Yet. We stopped at a quiet corner cafe I'd never noticed before, warm and dim, smelling of espresso and old wood. He ordered in Italian. Perfect pronunciation. Of course. Why are you really here? I asked. He studied me for a moment, then smiled slightly. Because my son hasn't stopped talking about you. My chest tightened. Is he okay? He is safe, Alessandro said. But he is curious. And I am a father who does not ignore curiosity. I just helped him. Most people don't. He leaned back. You didn't ask for money. You didn't call the police. You spoke to him in his mother's language. His gaze sharpened. That tells me things. I should have walked away. I didn't. We talked for an hour. About Florence. About New York. About Luca's school. He avoided questions about his work with surgical precision. When I finally stood to leave, he surprised me. I want to offer you a job. I laughed before I could stop myself. I make coffee. You speak Italian, he said. You're patient, and you don't scare easily. I don't work for strangers, I said. You already helped one, he replied calmly. This would be easier. I refused. Twice. He didn't push. He paid the bill and walked me outside. If you change your mind, he said, handing me a card. No name, just a number. New York is not as random as people think. He left me standing there, the card warm in my hand. That night, the car was back, parked across from my building. This time, it didn't bother hiding. Over the next week, my life began to shift in quiet, invasive ways. My rent issue disappeared without explanation. A parking ticket I hadn't paid was suddenly gone. A man followed me home once, sloppy and obvious, until another man stepped out of an alley and whispered something in his ear. He never looked at me again. I didn't call the number. I told myself that was strength. Then Luca got sick. A simple fever, Alessandro said, but he sounded tired on the phone in a way that made my chest ache. He keeps asking for you, he added, almost reluctantly. I stared at the wall of my apartment, the city humming outside. I'm not a babysitter, I said. No, he agreed. You're something else. I went. I told myself it was temporary. His apartment overlooked the river, glass and steel and quiet power. Luca ran to me like we were old friends. Alessandro watched from a distance, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. As the hours passed, I forgot to be afraid. We played. We spoke Italian. Luca fell asleep on my shoulder. When I looked up, Alessandro was staring at me with something close to wonder. You calm him, he said softly. You calm me. I replied before thinking. Silence stretched between us, thick and dangerous. Somewhere deep inside, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't being followed. I was being folded in. And once you step into a man like Alessandro Russo's world, you don't leave unchanged. The first time I saw violence connected to Alessandro Russo, it wasn't loud. That was what unsettled me most. No shouting, no chows, just efficiency. I was leaving his apartment late one evening, Luca already asleep in his room, when the elevator doors opened to reveal two men standing too close to each other. One of them was bleeding from the mouth. Not dramatically, just enough to stain his collar. The other man stood relaxed, one hand resting lightly on the injured man's shoulder like a friend offering comfort. Alessandro stepped forward before I could retreat. "E finita," he said calmly. "It's over." The bleeding man nodded frantically, murmuring apologies in Italian so fast they blurred together. Alessandro didn't raise his voice. He didn't touch him. He simply looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once. The man was escorted away. When the elevator doors closed, my hand was shaking. "What was that?" I asked. Alessandro studied me like he was deciding whether honesty was worth the risk. "A misunderstanding," he said. I laughed, sharp and hollow. "Don't insult me." Silence stretched between us. The apartment felt too quiet, too controlled. Finally, he exhaled. "I run things," he said. "What kind of things?" He didn't answer immediately. He poured himself a drink, didn't offer me one, then met my eyes. The kind that require loyalty. That was the first crack. The second came a week later. I was walking home alone when a man grabbed my wrist near my building. He smelled like alcohol and bad decisions. Before I could scream, a car screeched to a stop. Two men were out before the engine cut. The stranger barely had time to register fear before he was pulled away, folded into the shadows. Alessandro appeared beside me like he'd been summoned by instinct. "Are you hurt?" he asked, scanning me for injuries. My fear snapped into anger. "You had people watching me." "Yes." "No dinaid. No e paligi." "How long?" "Since the park." My stomach dropped. "You don't get to do that," I said. "You don't get to decide I need protecting." "In my world," he replied quietly, "everyone needs protecting. I shoved past him. He didn't stop me. The truth arrived fully 2 nights later, when I followed him. I didn't plan to. I told myself I was just going for air. But when his car pulled away from the building, something in me refused to stay ignorant. We ended up in a warehouse district by the river, abandoned on paper, but very much alive. I watched from across the street as men gathered, speaking in low voices, armed and organized. Alessandro stood at the center of it all, calm, controlled, issuing instructions with small gestures and quieter words. No crown, no throne, just authority. And everyone obeyed. I understood then. Not suspected. Understood. Mafia wasn't a word he needed. Power spoke for itself. My chest ached, not just with fear, but betrayal. He had let me laugh with his son. Let me feel safe. Let me care. When he spotted me, his face hardened instantly. He sent the others away with a glance and crossed the street alone. You shouldn't be here, he said. You lied to me. I shot back. I didn't tell you everything, he corrected. There's a difference. You're a criminal. He didn't flinch. I'm a provider, a protector, a problem solver. You're dangerous. His voice dropped. So is loving me. That was when everything broke open. We argued in the empty street, words sharp and raw. I accused him of manipulation. He accused me of naivety. He told me the truth in pieces, his family, his inheritance, the empire he never wanted but couldn't abandon. He told me about Luca's mother, gone because this life always takes something. I try to keep you outside it, he said. You didn't try hard enough, I replied. Silence fell heavy between us. If you stay, he said finally, you will never be free of this. And if I leave, you will always be looking over your shoulder, he answered honestly. I realized then that the fracture wasn't just between us. It was inside me. The safe life I thought I wanted felt thin now, unreal. And the dangerous one standing in front of me felt terrifyingly solid. I walked away that night. But love, I learned too late, doesn't disappear just because you tell it to. The attack didn't come with warning. It never does. It came disguised as normal life, which was worse. I was back in my apartment, telling myself I'd done the right thing by leaving Alessandro's world when the power cut out without explanation. No flique, just silence. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I didn't answer. A knock followed, sharp and deliberate, not loud enough to be desperate. I knew better than to open the door. My phone buzzed again. A text this time. Don't move. My chest tightened. Another message followed immediately. They're not here for you, but they'll use you. I knew who it was without needing the name. I backed away from the door as footsteps echoed in the hallway, voices low and unfamiliar. Not Alessandro's men. Too sloppy. Too loud. Someone try my handle. Once. Twice. Then a crash farther down the hall. Shouting. Running. By the time the sirens arrived, the building was chaos. Alessandro didn't come that night. He stayed away on purpose. I understood that later. The next morning, the news broke quietly. A warehouse fire by the river. Suspected organized crime connection. No names mentioned. No arrests. I was pouring coffee when Luca's school called. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. They said there had been an incident. A suspicious vehicle. Luca was unharmed, but they'd moved him to a secure location. I didn't ask where. I already knew. I went straight to Alessandro. I didn't knock. I walked into his world like I belonged there now, fear stripping away any illusion of choice. He was on the phone when I arrived, voice low, lethal. He ended the call and turned to me. His face was calm, but his eyes were darker than I'd ever seen them. They crossed the line, he said. They already did, I replied. You just didn't think they'd cross it with me. He didn't deny it. That hurt more than any apology would have helped. You should leave, he said. Tonight. I'm not leaving Luca. I shot back. His jaw tightened. That's exactly why you should. That was the moment the cost became real. Comfort meant walking away, pretending I was just collateral damage in someone else's war. Loyalty meant staying and accepting that nothing would ever be simple again. The betrayal came from inside. It always does. One of his men, someone I'd seen laugh with Luca, sold information to a rival family, trying to weaken Alessandro through exposure, through fear. Law enforcement pressure followed fast. Subtle at first, then obvious. Cars parked too long. Questions asked twice. Alessandro moved pieces on the board faster than I could follow, shifting assets, people, routines. He didn't sleep. Neither did I. One night, shots were fired outside the building. Not aimed at us. A message. Luca walked screaming. I held him while Alessandro stood in the doorway, helpless in a way I'd never seen him before. That was when love stopped being a feeling and turned into a decision. I could leave. I could be safe. Or I could stay and become something harder. When it came down to it, Alessandro didn't ask me what I wanted. He acted. He moved Luca out of the city under guard. He turned himself visible, deliberately drawing attention away from me. He handed me a passport and cash I didn't accept. This is not a test, he said. If you go, I will not follow. I looked at him, then really looked and understood the truth beneath the power. Loving him meant never being his weakness. I'm staying, I said. His face didn't change, but something in his eyes broke open. Then you stay on your feet, he said, and you don't look away. That was the cost. Not blood, not money. Awareness. Choice. I stepped closer. I'm not afraid of you, I said. I'm afraid of losing you. He nodded once. Outside, the city kept moving, unaware that lines had been crossed that couldn't be erased. Loving a man like Alessandro Russo didn't ruin you all at once. It stripped you slowly until what remained was deliberate, unbreakable, and chosen. The morning air in Manhattan was crisp, almost deceptively calm, and the usual din of honking horns and sirens barely reached the townhouse as I stood by the window, tracing the light across Luca's scattered toys, my mind replaying every chaotic moment of the past week. Alessandro had spent nights away, meetings that smelled like tension and violence, calls whispered in Italian that I didn't understand but feared, his absence leaving the house hollow, yet charged with an invisible threat. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts from Marco, Vincent, updates about movements, precautions, the web of the outside world encroaching into our sanctuary, each notification tightening the knot in my stomach. Then the call came, a single line of text, no number displayed, only words that made my pulse spike. He's vulnerable. They know. My instinct screamed at me to flee, to grab Luca and disappear into the city, to erase any trace of us before danger touched our lives. But I couldn't. Not after everything we had survived together. Loyalty, love, responsibility, threads binding me to this fractured, dangerous family tighter than fear could pull me away. Alessandro returned that afternoon. Dark coat brushing the floor, eyes shadowed and unreadable, but when they found mine, the storm behind them softened just slightly. Sophia, he said, voice low, controlled, a predator and protector wrapped into one, and the weight of his presence filled the entire room. They're moving faster than we anticipated. The surveillance we thought discreet, they've caught on. I swallowed hard, gripping the windowsill as if it were the last anchor to the world I understood. Is Luca? I asked, voice trembling. He shook his head, and the words cut sharply through the silence. Safe. For now. But I can't risk him seeing this. You'll stay here. I'll handle the perimeter. There was no question in his tone, no negotiation, just the authority that had governed every moment of our lives since that first meeting in Central Park, and I obeyed, knowing instinctively that disobedience could be catastrophic. Hours later, we were crouched behind the massive oak doors of the townhouse's main entry. Gunmetal gray SUVs idling outside, shadows of men blending with the architecture like living camouflage, while inside, Lucas slept in his room, oblivious and innocent, unaware of the storm circling our doorstep. I wanted to hold him, shield him with my body, but Alessandro's hand on my shoulder kept me still. This is bigger than either of us, he whispered, voice near my ear. Trust me, you and Luca are the center of this world. I'll take the risk for both of you. I won't ask. You just live. I felt the weight of those words settle on my chest, suffocating yet strangely freeing. Living, in this case, meant obeying boundaries I never wanted, suppressing panic, accepting danger as a constant companion, and knowing the man I loved carried the world's darkness yet offered me its light. The first assault came that evening. A rival family, a strike meant to test, intimidate, draw Alessandro into the open, a calculated display of power. Explosions of firecrackers and gunshots shattered the nighttime calm, echoing down the streets like a warning. Security responded immediately, but I heard it, the vulnerable gasp of Luca, the soft whimper I would have sworn was meant for me. I raced into his room, heart hammering, scooped him into my arms, his tiny fingers clutching at my shirt, and realized in that instant that this wasn't just about me anymore. His world, his life was tethered to my choices, my courage, my restraint. Alessandro arrived moments later, silent, lethal, moving through the chaos like a shadow, cutting through threats with precision that made my blood run cold and my admiration burn hotter. He didn't look at me. His eyes were on the attackers, calculating, predatory, perfect in execution. Yet when the danger passed and the smoke cleared, he crossed the room and wrapped me in his arms, protective, fierce, unyielding. No words, just the thrum of his heartbeat against mine, the tremor of relief beneath the steel. "You're safe. Both of you," he murmured, and I wanted to argue, to protest, but all I could do was hold him. Let the storm in my chest find some semblance of calm in the warmth of his presence. Let the reality sink in that survival meant trust, obedience, and surrender to the man who had become our fortress. The following days blurred into movement, strategy, tension, and quiet terror. Rival families tried to manipulate. The police poked their noses. Legal threats hung like poisoned fruit over every decision, and betrayal simmered close, unexpected, silent. Alessandro remained a fortress, impenetrable yet human, revealing just enough vulnerability for me to see him not as a god or a monster, but as a man risking everything for the two lives that mattered most. There were moments when fear nearly broke me, when a car followed too closely, when Luca's laughter was cut short by a distant shout, but Alessandro always intercepted, always anticipated, always shielded. And in those moments, I understood something profound. Love, true love, costs more than comfort, more than safety. It demands surrender, trust, courage, and a willingness to stake your soul on someone else's honor. By the end of the week, the threat had been neutralized, a combination of brute force, cunning, and calculated negotiation, leaving a silence thick with relief. Alessandro, Luca, and I stood on the terrace of the townhouse. The city spread beneath us, lights twinkling like distant stars in a dark velvet sky. He placed a hand on my waist, one on Luca's small shoulder, and I felt the weight of the ordeal in every muscle, every heartbeat. "We survived," I whispered, voice barely audible, overwhelmed by the intensity of our shared ordeal. He shook his head, dark eyes locking with mine, sharp and soft all at once. "No, we thrived, because loyalty isn't about what's easy. It's about standing together when everything tries to pull you apart. Love isn't a luxury. It's the risk you accept willingly." I drew Luca close, watching his innocent gaze, then Alessandro, understanding fully the depth of what I had chosen. The cost of love had been high. Sleepless nights, threats, moral ambiguity, constant awareness that danger lurked at every corner. Yet the reward was undeniable. Safety, connection, belonging, a love forged in the crucible of chaos. I looked at Alessandro and whispered, "I'll pay the cost. I'll stand with you." His lips curved just slightly, as if relief and pride were too heavy for words. He brushed a dark curl from Luca's forehead, then mine. "And I'll protect you without question, without asking, because that's what it means to love." The city hummed below, indifferent, unaware, yet in that townhouse, among shadows and light, we had found a balance between danger and devotion, chaos and calm. Love had survived. We had survived with it. The nights settled in, heavy and real, and I realized finally that I understood fully. To love Alessandro Russo was to accept the world he commanded, the risks he bore, the moral lines he crossed, and to find, within all of it, a sanctuary where trust, passion, and loyalty reigned unbroken. We were scarred, we were tested, but we were together, and that was everything.